Hello, and welcome back to the Casual Leader podcast, your weekly dose of real talk for people building real businesses and trying not to lose their sanity along the way. I'm your host, and today we are rolling up our sleeves, like opening your laptop and follow along type of practical tip. And if you are near your laptop right now, grab it, because by the end of this episode, you could have something built that will save you time every single day. We are building a Claude skill from scratch. And I know that might sound intimidating if you have never done it before, but I promise you this is one of the simplest, most useful things that you can do with AI right now. We are talking about a Markdown file. That is the barrier of entry. A Markdown file. But before we get into the build, I want to address something that I think trips up a lot of people. If you have been paying attention to Claude over the past few months, you have probably seen a bunch of different terms flying around, such as skills, agents, subagents, hooks, MCPs, plugins. And if your reaction was, that's one too many, and I'm going to close this tab, I'm not going to blame you. I know there are a lot of things flying around these days. So we're going to untangle all of that first, very high level as a summary. Then we're going to get into what skills actually are, how they look like, who they are for, and then we're actually going to build one together. So let's get started. So picture this. You have just started using Claude Code. Or maybe you've just been using it for a while and someone says, you should set up some skills. And you get to Google or, ask Claude chat. And it's suddenly you're reading about agents and subagents and hooks and MCP servers and plugins and Claude.md files and all sorts of things. And your brain just like short circuits a little bit because it all sounds like the same thing. And it's not. And the difference actually matters. So let me break this down first. Think about like running a restaurant kitchen. Claude.md is your house rules, the stuff that applies to every single dish, every single shift. So for example, we always use sea salt, never table salt. We plate on white dishes. It's the thing that basically loads in every single conversation. It's the base that Claude has in your project. If there is something that Claude should always know or always do, it goes there. A skill is more like a recipe card. When an order comes in for a specific dish, the chef would pull the recipe, read it, follow it, but the recipe is not sitting on the countertop all the time. You see what I mean? When you're not making that recipe, that dish, that recipe goes back into the book. Skills work more or less the same way. They only load when Claude recognizes that what you are asking for matches that skill that is designed to do. The rest of the time, they just stay in the drawer hidden away. An agent, on the other hand, is the chef that actually does the cooking. Not just reading the recipe, not just doing the instructions, not just looking at the house rules, but the actual doing the work, making the decisions in real time, adjusting the heat, the tasting, the palette, the condiments, the spices. When Claude is operating in Claude Code or Cowork, it is acting like an agent. It actually reads the files. It writes code, it runs commands, it checks whether something worked or not, and it adapts from there. Now let's talk about a subagent. A subagent is what happens when your head chef has too much on their plate to do and says to the sous chef, hey, can you handle the sauce? And I'll handle everything else, or the protein, or you know what I mean, like something specific. In Claude Code, the main agent can spin up a bunch of smaller ones and very, very focused on different instances to handle very specific subtasks. Each one gets a really narrow job that has to do, and then reports back to the main agent. Hooks, on the other hand, are the kitchen timer or the automatic system. Nobody just triggers them all the time manually. They just fire when a condition is met. A hook might run a code linter every single time or save in a specific file. The same way that, a buzzer goes off when the temperature hits 400 in an oven, let's say. It's event-driven, not request-driven. That's the main difference here. On the other side, the MCP servers are the supply chain for restaurants. The restaurants are actually getting food from suppliers, from producers to their kitchens. MCPs operate in a very similar way. They connect Claude to the outside world, to your Google Drive, to your Slack, to your Notion, to your GitHub, to whatever tools you're actually using. Without MCPs, Claude is working with whatever it's in front of it or whatever you give it access to. With MCPs, it can actually reach out and pull data in, push some certain updates, and interact with the outside world. And the last but not least, plugins are like packed kits. Like the ones for sourdough starter kits? It's kind of like that. For a plugin to actually exist, someone needs to bundle up a set of skills, tools, and resources, put them in a marketplace, and you install them in your setup. That's kind of how it works. Now, here's the most important part. They are not competing options, where you pick one over the other. They're actually designed to work all together. A real setup might use Claude.md for the baseline rule, a handful of skills for task-specific knowledge, hooks for automated quality checks, for example, MCP servers for talking to your tools, and subagents when a job just gets too big. But today, we're going to be very focused on skills because they are the most accessible starting point and, in my opinion, one of the highest returns for time you invest. Okay, so let's start building a skill. First things first, let's make a directory called AI News Reporter. And I'm just going to check that it's in there. Yes. Okay, it was created. Great. Now let's open it in the code editor of choice. Mine is WebStorm. So I'm going to go in my projects and actually open in a new window the directory that we just created, the project that we just created. Cool. Now, first of all, Claude. And as you can see, Claude is up and running. It's ready. And you can actually see a little bit of your activity and so on here. And Claude is up and running. Now, there are two ways that you can start doing this. You can either type everything manually one by one, or you can go to skills.sh and look for the skill. I believe it's called creator. Yes. From Anthropic. So Anthropic actually created this to help us create a skill so we don't have to create it from scratch. This is super simple. You're just going to copy it and then paste it in the command line. However, if you want, we can actually go one by one and break it down on what you need to do. First of all, you're going to have to create a new directory that is going to be .claude. Second, inside .claude, you're going to have another directory that it's going to be called skills. So let's create it. And here, very, very, very important, you're going to have your skills. Now, you can create a new directory with the skill that you want. So let's say I'm going to name mine AI News Reporter, but this can be whatever name you want. And inside here, this is where you're going to have your Markdown file that is called with capital, all in capital letters, skill.md. Sorry. Very, very important. Not skills, not capital, just capitalized skills with capital S and everything else, lowercase, not skills, not anything else. It's very important. Claude only recognizes this MD file format that's called skill. So we're going to create that. So here you're going to start with your front matter, which is basically your name and your description. And then you can add a few other attributes, but to start with, those are the very, very important ones. Or we can install the skill creator. So I'm gonna open a new command line. I'm gonna run the skill. I need to install an additional package, which is completely fine. And then as you can see, skills have been installed. Then you're gonna actually be asked if you want for Claude Code, for OpenClaw, for whatever you want to select. For me, it's gonna be Claude Code. And I want this to be installed at the project level. For me, a lot of the skills I need are at the project level. Symlink, yes, please. Proceed with the installation. Of course. Cool, done. Now you're going to see if you didn't have it, if you didn't start before and you didn't have it, the .claude folder, then you would have seen it appearing here. But you also, if you noticed, I have .agents as well. And they have a couple of skills that are being installed too. Those are just additional little bonuses. So as you can see, we have our skills folder. The skill that we're going to use to create our skill is actually here called Skill Creator. Now, because we're actually using this, it's a little bit easier. It's a little bit seamless compared to starting everything from scratch. So you have a couple of instructions that you can use if you want, but it's basically really simple. You're going to want to restart Claude. So very important, every time you install a new skill, in order for it to run, you have to restart Claude, which is what we're going to do here. And now we're going to use our brand new skill creator basically to create our skill. So we're going to say skill creator. Let's say, please create a skill called AI News Reporter that writes summaries of the latest AI news. Used when creating a blog post, social media content, or when the user asks to summarize the latest AI news. And I kind of gave it an overall view of what I want my skill to look like. So I gave it the name of my skill, what I want the name to look like, and what I want the skill to do or to represent. And now we're just waiting for this beautiful magic to happen. And as you can see, it might ask a few questions, it might not. So it says, I would like to understand a bit more what you're envisioning before I drop the skills. Let me take a quick look at the project first, and then I have a few questions. So sometimes if you give it a bit more context, it will just, run with it. Other times it's going to ask you a couple of questions. Now let's see what we're going to get out of it. So before it goes forward, it asked us, one, do we want the news resources, the output format, the tone of the audience, the test cases? Like, what do we want to do? So in this case, what I would say is create a generic one, and we're going to pick it up from there. I will mention the specific URLs afterwards. Now, if you want, because I want to go step by step and explain everything, but if you already have all the details that it's asking, then you can clearly paste it here or tell it, and it's going to adapt and adjust. However, I would like to go a little bit more in depth in why and how we're approaching the skill. So for the purpose of this example, I'm just going to say, create a generic one. So let's see what it's going to come up with. Do you want to overwrite? Yes, of course, because it already saw that there is a file, a Markdown file that was called skill. Cool. So let's look at what we have. It already created it. It drafted a skill, and now we can adjust it and pick it up from there. So very important, front matter right here. This part is most likely responsible for more than 50% of the cases when you're going to have to troubleshoot if a skill doesn't work. The way Claude works, like I mentioned before, is it doesn't index or keeps in the context everything in the skills. It just keeps the name and the description. So a very brief summary of what the skill is about. And then it calls it use it it's using it when required based on what you have in the name and the description. So in this case, it kept the name that we gave it. It says write summary. It basically took our description. Use a skill for whatever you want, like blog post, Also triggers when the user shares article URLs and wants to distill them into readable format, even if they don't say news explicitly. Well, that's a little bit embellished compared to what I had in mind. I wanted something that's very specific, like I said, use when creating a blog post, social media content, or when the user asks to summarize the latest AI news. So I would say also trigger when the user now remove this. When the user asks to summarize the latest AI news specifically. I want to be very, very specific with my skill descriptions, because then if I have too many, they're not going to work properly. They're going to start overwriting each other, and I'm not going to get at the same output. So I want to make sure what I'm saying in the description is what I meant. Now, it already created a couple of things here. So this is the front matter, which is the most important part. This is basically the body, and this is where you're going to have your steps and your instructions. So let's take a look at this one. The first one is AI News Reporter. So it basically gives you a headline of, tells Claude you are an AI news reporter. Your job is to read resources materials about AI development and produce clear, engaging summaries tailored to your users' needs. I think that's fair. That's pretty much it, what the role would look like and how it works. Well, here I told it to be fairly general, so fair enough. This is what it did. However, I would like to take it a step in a different direction. I do not want to just give it a very general, you fetch them with the key informations and so on. I would like something more structured, more 1 to 3 type of steps. Because if you look at it, we have gathering source materials, writing then the summary and the output, and what to include, what not to include. Now, I do not like this part. I would change it to maybe, instead of how it works, I would say steps. Makes a bit more sense for me. And here, I would like to leverage another skill. One that will make it a little bit easier for Claude to go and browse, right? Different sources that I wanted to fetch. And now, full disclosure, we have at alpy.io a browse skill. Yes, it's ours. And we are actually using it in quite a few projects. And what we noticed is it's way, way, way better than any other browse skills out there, any web fetches, anything. It's more lightweight, faster, quicker, more accurate. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy. I am going to install it. Now I'm just waiting. The argument I want for Claude Code. Project level, yes, yes, please. Proceed with the installation. And now, if you look in the skill directory here, browse appeared. So let's leverage this said beautiful skill. I would say something like use skill, and I would mention here the skill, which is browse. And then I will break it down by steps, right? So I would say first and foremost, for each run, browse go-to. And see, this is the problem with a lot of the voice and dictation. I'm actually using right now and testing Whisper Flow. Don't know if you can see it here. And I love to test and see if they're actually understanding the terms, especially the engineering terms or in the engineering context. And what I found is that some of them do, some of them don't. Some of them you actually have to add them to your dictionary or vocabulary. But anyway, I digress. So basically, what I want here to do is for each of the URL that I'm about to mention, run browse as a skill when I want to run this skill. So we're running a skill within the skill. Now, let's say what URLs we want. So let's say we want TechCrunch. So that would be one, because I don't want to, for this skill, to go just like randomly and fetch any random AI news. I want the sources to be very much validated. So then I also want Hacker News as well, because this is the mother load. And let's say I also would like something like Product Hunt, right? Everyone's announcing their, not Nachi, everyone's announcing, speaking of Whisper Flow, yeah, today's leaderboard is powered by. How funny is that? Product Hunt, and also I want the TLDR. This is a source that I'm actually using for a while now. They have quite interesting and up-to-date news that maybe you're not going to find everywhere else. Some of them, obviously, they're going to cross-reference, but not all of them. Okay. What you can actually do is you can list here like hundreds if you want to. Just you can create a separate folder where you can fetch all the URLs every single time, go through them. So you can actually go a little bit more, in depth than this one. But for the sake of this example, I'm going to keep it at 4. And then let's say, so for each of them, run browse go to see the latest news published in the last day. So since this is going to be a daily skill, like a daily AI news reporter, I would like to make sure that they're just going for the last day, not just randomly summarizing whatever they want. Now, step number 2, important. Run browse text to match AI. And here you're going to want, again, see what I mean? This is a command from browse, actually. So browse go to, browse text. Those are commands from the other skill. And I want to match specifically the word AI. Okay, number 3, very important. Save each of these articles in the outputs folder in the root as new files.md with the name in the format. And we're going to give it a format here. So, for example, for me, it's important to know what date it was because I would like to keep a track of it. What month, and then year. I don't know, maybe this is just me, but you can name it whatever you want, but in a way so you can like actually distinguish it. You know what I mean? You need to understand like when it keeps creating every day. If you want, you can do like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. You know what I mean? Like just count them down. But at least like for me, it's important to have it in a chronological order by day. It's just my weirdness. So I would say in this format. So for each of these articles, something that you need to keep in mind here, the outputs, this folder doesn't exist yet. So it's going to have to create it the first time, and most likely it's going to ask you for permission. And this we're saying at the root. So ideally what we would like to see is here at the root, we should see it. And we want to make sure it's in .md format, very important, because that's also, so a Markdown files actually, they're the best way for Claude or any other AI agents or AIs in general to understand content. So if you want to use it, for writing a blog post, writing anything else afterwards from this summary, best output is .md. And like we mentioned, the root file with the name in the format, month, date, month, year. And at the end, I would say for the following formats. And this is where I am gonna change it a little bit. So all of a sudden, we don't need to gather source material anymore. We gave it some very specific format. And by the way, if you don't want to use browse, that's completely fine. Use web fetch, web search, the way it's explained here. And, you be the judge of it. You give it a try and let me know if you liked it or not. And this is where we have the following format. So normally the way I would go about is, this is where I would go with the output formats. So I would move the general principles, but that's just me, at the bottom here. And I would remove this. I would keep it super simple for now. Output formats. So adapt your output based on what the user asks for. And this is where we have the general briefing. So you have a structure summary with a headline, 2 to 3 paragraphs of overview, bullet points for key details. Think of it as a quick read briefing for someone who wants to stay informed but doesn't have the time to read the full article. Well, here is where I would say, as an addition, include the URLs to the source. Because, look, if I would like to go in depth and read the full thing, I would like to just have the source, not go and look for it. Now, for the blog post, a longer, more narrative piece, 400 to 800 words, with a clear introduction, organized structure, and conclusion. Should feel like a published blog post, informative, readable, with a natural flow. Include a suggested title. I think it's good enough for now. Social media posts, short form content tailored to the platform. We have LinkedIn, X, general social. And this is where you can adjust the tones, you can adjust the like what you want for it to sound, how long you want it to be. It's already suggesting like a word count with a maximum to make sure that it actually respects each platform. But you can tweak it to be very, very, very specific if you want. Now, custom format. If the user describes a specific format of tone, follow their lead. The categories above are defaults, not constraints. Very important. When summarizing multiple sources, when the user provides several articles, look for the common thread. What's the overarching story? Synthesize rather than summarize each article separately. The user wants one coherent piece, not a list of individual summaries. Well, yes and no. I would actually like them to be separate. So I would say summarize each article separate. The user wants separate coherent pieces, not a list or not a long summary. One long summary. If the articles cover genuinely different topics, group them thematically and use clear section breaks. Makes sense, right? Then what to include for each of the piece? What happened? So this is actually something that I care about. I want them to have the highlight of the core, like what's the main thing that happened, who's involved, companies, researchers, organization, and so on. Why it matters, so the significance of implication for the broader AI landscape. What's next? So what are the kind of like the next things that we care? And I would say I would add here one more line. I would say anything worth mentioning. And on this part, I would still keep if available. That's important. And I will put something, if anything of significance is worth mentioning, please add it here. That doesn't really go in any other parts. Please watch out for narrow, specific, quirky, weird announcements. So this is going to be like a very specific category. Then we have the general principle that we're a little bit higher up, which is lead with what matters. So it's a little bit of a rule of how to shape the output. So lead with what matters, be specific over vague, explain jargon when it adds value, attribute claims, stay neutral. So it doesn't kind of like take a point of view. Now, these ones are more generic, and you do have to make sure that you can review them and they don't just automatically add whatever you might not like. But so far, from what I can see, everything looks fine. And length of the guidelines. So match the depth of the content. A mirror product update doesn't need 800 words. A major research breakthrough deserves thorough coverage. When in doubt, err on the size of concise. The user can always ask for more details. Well, here I would say instead of 800 words, I would do maybe like a 2000, a bit more generous, or it can be 1200. And so far, just to recap, we have the front matter with the name and the description. We have the role of basically what we would like for Claude to assume when it uses the skills, the steps, what we would like for it to do, and how we would like the output to look like the result after it does the steps above, what would we like for it to look like, and a little bit of house rules, what we'd like to see, what to include, how to phrase it. Now, a few other things that I would say is maybe we want to break it down a little bit further. So maybe we would like for the general principles to add a couple of more things. So maybe we would want to say something like, always attribute the news to its original source. That's something that maybe we care about, maybe we don't, who knows. Or maybe we want something to say like, be factual and avoid speculations. Or something like, focus on developments from the past one day. Even though we said it above, I'm going to repeat it nevertheless. I think it's important sometimes to iterate just to make sure. And I would maybe add something it's more of an annoyance of mine, which is remove any long hyphens that a typical AI generated content would use. So I added a couple of extra little things here and there. And so far, I think we've done a pretty darn gosh good job. So let's see how it would run. Let's see if it runs. So important, make sure you restart Claude because we made changes to the skill. And now, let's say we want the AI news reporter. Yes, it's available. And you can see here a little bit of the description of what it does. So let's say we're going to ask. So we see that the skill is actually working, right? But what if we just ask without actually calling the skill directly? So let's say something like, what is the latest in AI for the last 24 hours? We should see the skill being loaded, and then we should see it working. Yep, successfully loaded the skill, AI news reporter. Now, use skill. It's asking me for permission. You can just say yes and don't ask again, or you can just keep it. For me specifically, especially when I do examples for different projects, I like to keep it as, one by one every time to ask me for permission every time, just to show you guys. So I would say yes. And now you're going to see that it's going to start running browse, which means that it's going to go URL by URL. And yep. Oh, and actually, the browse CLI is not installed, so it's going to use the web search instead. So that means we just did not install something right. Okay, so as you can see, it loaded the skill successfully. However, it did not find browse. So it tried to use web search. Basically, it tried to skip all the steps. That's fine. What we're going to do is we need to install browse CLI. That's on me. But you also have a couple of other options. what you can do is, and I'll put all the links down below, you can go to our repo, which is completely public and open sourced. And here you can just install it globally or per project, and you can just npm install allpy-/browse. And once you do that, it's already here. So you should be able to see it in like your node or your package.json. Now run Claude again, and let's ask for the same. What is the latest in AI for the last 24 hours? And while it's jitterbugging, you can see that the skill was successfully loaded. Ask for permission. 3 tools are allowed. And now it's basically executing the steps that we mentioned. So it's going to TechCrunch, it's going to Hacker News, it's going to go to Product Hunt, and it's going to go to the TLDR Tech News. Beautiful. Absolutely beautiful. And you can also see the number of tokens that are going up. You can feel free to, go and explore. Now, I can see that it also decided to do another search on The Verge for some reason. Interesting. If you want to limit it at the URLs that you want, you can just say specifically, exactly, or only run only for each of these URLs. Make sure that it's a little bit more tight around the edges. This one was a little bit more general because that's how we started. And now, as you can see, it's reading the articles in details. It runs parallel batches. It tries to understand what's happening, the latest in AI. So let's see. If we're actually going back here, if we are going to TLDR, you're going to see that we have Google develops its own agent to compete with Cowork. Org design, the age of AI, Apple chooses Amazon satellites. So we should see also something along those lines. But let me fast forward it a little bit. Okay. Now it has enough material, as you can see. So it's checking to understand what the next steps are. So it basically went through these steps. So far, it went through here. Now it's looking at the outputs, which it needs to create. And you can see that it created here. And now it's going to go through all the formats that we mentioned. And it's going to go through all the general principles, everything that we mentioned that it should do. Also, side note, after the general principles, if you want, you can also add what not to do. So make sure if you have like a longer list, I would say separate it. And I would say, remove, make sure you don't include any long hyphens. Make sure you don't include any insert things here. And now it's sketching. This is what it's doing. So it should create here a file in the outputs folder, a Markdown file with the date, month, and year, with the output that we asked it in the format that we asked it, with the news from the latest 24 hours, basically the latest day. So do you want me to create the 16th of April, 2026 MD? And I said, yes, absolutely. It's discombobulating now. I love these ones. I love every time, like when Claude is doing something, those little placeholders are so funny. So now you can see what it's gonna add in the file. Okay, so outputs has the Markdown file. Yep, that's correct. And now, number 1, Canva launches AI 2.0, a prompt-powered design assistant that calls its own tools. And you can see that it actually gives me the source, why it matters, and the kind of main headline that it released its major AI assistant, ta-da-da-da. Let's do actually like a little preview here so we can read it better. So you're gonna see it in the Markdown. or if you want, you can see it as a preview. I will just go really, really high level through them, and then I will show you the breakdown in the Markdown file. So you can see the source, TechCrunch, the Canva launch. Then DeepL moves beyond text with real-time voice-to-voice translation, again from TechCrunch. We have another one from TechCrunch in terms of raising 8.5 million, which is interesting. OpenAI update on its agents SDK. Again, TechCrunch. Adobe launches Firefly Assistant. Google rolls out the native Gemini app for Mac. Then we have another TechCrunch article, Hacker News discussion. So interesting. It went all through TechCrunch, and now it's going through Hacker News. Another Hacker News, Codex hacked a Samsung TV. And then worth mentioning, other resources that it found worth mentioning. However, I noticed that it doesn't have anything from the TLDR.tech or Product Hunt from what I can see here. Right? Okay, so let's see what happened here. Let's go back to Trace. So it loaded a couple of things. It loaded TechCrunch. It verified some of the sources, a lot of TechCrunch, but The Verge, no, it actually loaded these ones, but for some reason they didn't found them that relevant. So let's ask, why didn't you mention anything from Product Hunt or from TLDR sources? I would also double check the skill in this case, because maybe we just forgot a comma or we just forgot something. No, everything seems to be pretty all right. I would also do this, and let's see. And look, sometimes you're going to get it right the first time, and sometimes you're going to have to do some back and forth. Honestly, I do ask Claude, like, why didn't you include those sources? So maybe let's ask, why didn't you include Product Hunt in the first place and the URL that are strictly in the skill? So as you can see, it says, as per usual. You're right, and I apologize. The skill explicitly lists Product Hunt as one of the 4 sources to check. When browser got a 403, I should have immediately tried web fetch as a fallback instead of skipping it and moving to The Verge, which isn't even in the skill source list. I treated the 403 as a dead end when I had another tool available that I could fetch at the same URL. That was a mistake in my approach. I should have exhausted all retrieval methods for each required source before giving up. So same applies to TLDR. So basically, tried Product Hunt. For some reason, it got a 403. So let's see. Did we? No, Product Hunt URL looks good. TLDR URL looks good. Okay, so let's give it maybe one more try. I'll run Claude again because I made a small little change here to the skill. If you want that skill to be reflected, don't forget. And speaking of, before we're doing anything else, a couple of things to mention. If you want here at the front matter to specify which model you want every single time, you can. For example, I love Opus so far. So every single time the skill will run, we'll use Opus as a model instead of defaulting to whatever I have running or whatever Claude chooses. So let's do this and let's see what we're going to get. I will rename this beautiful one so we can have as a V1, so we can have a term of comparison. I will run Claude again. Fantastic. And I will actually ask it the exact same thing. What is the latest in AI for the last 24 hours? Okay, so I kind of lost you guys there for a little while. I think this is what happens when you shoot on location. My apologies for that. To recap, we basically run it again. We try it again with the latest in AI to to give it another shot. And as you can see, it opened TechCrunch, it investigated Y Combinator, and then it went through Product Hunt. And as you can see, this website uses a security service to protect against malicious bots. Now, we're not a malicious bot. However, AI can look like that. And it seems like Product Hunt is blocking with Cloudflare. Let me try CamoFox and also hit other resources. So the thing is, if you are going to try to set up an automation, a skill, an agent, anything to crawl certain websites, or just open them, access them, or just do a Google search, for example, a lot of the times you're going to encounter now, these days especially, AI blocking bot. And CamoFox, and there are a couple of other ones, actually bypass that. That's how you are actually going to be able to open resources such as Product Hunt or TLDR Tech, because they both had the same problem. Surprise, surprise. So in order to do that, you have a couple of options. One, you can ask Claude and to try to install it and use it. Or you can ask Claude to use any of the skills available. So if one fails, it can try web fetch, it can try fetch web, it can try anything that's at its disposal. Or you can try and use something like, so we have at AllPy, it's called Browse Stealth. And you can try and install this skill and use it very specifically. So for this one, you're going to see that it's using CamoFox, it's using Google, it's using a couple of other things that you can bypass certain things. So it's going to try browse by default. It's going to try Chrome. It has Mozilla. It has a couple of other ones that it can try. But then with Browse Stealth, it can actually try CamoFox, which it's going to bypass. So that's something that we can actually try. I gave it quite a bit of try here in the meantime. So I will fast forward to the last one when I was talking by myself without you guys. Apologies for that. And I will just say, I will copy this command. I will install it for Claude Code. At the project level, Symlink, yes, all done. And now I added a little line here where I said, discover all skills available to you that are relevant for these steps. Use skill as browse, the browse skill. And for each, we're going to keep everything exactly the same. But now we have browse stealth for our skill as well. So we're going to restart Claude again. And we're going to ask the same thing. What is the latest in AI for the last 24 hours? Let's see if this fixed the problem. If you want, you can actually mention exactly which skill instead of saying discover all skills available. You can mention the way we mentioned browse as well. And a couple of quick tips up until Claude is doing its thing and it's running. You can actually add your tone of voice if you want. I will give a few approvals here. Because in a skill, so we have the skills directory that has all the skills that we're using. And then within the skill directory, you can have actually a couple of other directories, a couple of other folders. So you can have assets, you can have references, and you can have also scripts. If you want, you can run full scripts that you can reference here in the main skill, in the skill.md, that will reference back and run whatever it needs for you to run to complete the job or the task. Now, I would also say, if you want to write for, in our example, like the AI news reporter, in the tone of voice of the casual leader, we could easily just add here another, let's say, a new directory. I would call it references. So all my references are going to be here. And then I actually have a tone of voice for the casual leader Markdown file. So here I can add anything that I want for to sound like the casual leader. And since I have already done this, because I have a daily AI news already, I will get my tone of voice from here. So this is basically the brand, who we are, how we sound, what are we saying, what do we stand for. It's everything that makes the casual leader the casual leader. I'll just copy it, paste it here. Markdown files, again, are just like easier to understand by Claude. So I would add it here. And now, I think it's done. Let's just check it out first. It's going to be version 3. And here's what happened. Google launched, and you can see that it actually got the source from Google AI blog, then TechCrunch, Cloudflare blog, TechCrunch, Hacker News that went also to Dark Bloom, Hugging Face, CNBC, Product Hunt, Bloomberg. So it actually went on a couple of other resources that are still AI related, but it still kept the ones that it could access from our side. In this case, I'm pretty happy. I'm okay if it actually goes through mine and then a bit more. For the TLDR, it still can't access it, and that's because it gets blocked because it sees as an AI bot. So what I would say is, if you use Browse Stealth and you actually update to be specifically the skill to use Browse Stealth, that would work. This is at least like what I have it for my daily AI skill. Now, because we mentioned that we want to use the casual leader tone of voice, I would say let's actually see it in action. So what I would add here for our skill as a general principle, we could say, instead of be specific over vague, explain jargon, and so on, stay neutral, report without editorials, let the facts speak, I would say we could even like go one step further. If you want, you can keep it simpler. I want to be a bit more, complex, I would say, to give you a few options. So I maybe would say something here like, write in clear, accessible style, avoiding unnecessary jargon, and using the casual leader tone from, and this is where I would actually add the reference. So it would be the references file, and here is where I would add the tone of voice from the casual leader, .md file. So basically I'm referencing how it should sound. Okay, so in this case, let's give it a shot. First, restart Claude again, and now let's say something like, can you please look at the top 5 AI news from the last day and create a blog post. And now we see that the AI news reporter, our skill, was successfully loaded. Now it's starting to check the tone of voice reference and then browse the news sources for the latest AI news. You want to use browse as a skill? Yes, absolutely, we want to. And then, while it's gonna do its thing, I just want to go really quickly through the latest one. So the latest one kind of has pretty much the same, let's do a preview, the same structure. As you can see, it's consistent, it has the same structure, the same output, the same everything. Now, because we're using the tone of voice, and by the way, here you can get like really chunky into it. You can add your logo, your colors, if you want bullet points or stars, or if you want to do all sorts of things that like are very specific to you, and you can add it in the reference. If you want, you can add 2 more folders, assets and scripts. For scripts, you can actually run or ask a specific task to be run, and then it can be referenced in your skill, which is pretty cool. And for assets, any imagery that maybe you want to use, logos, whatever you might have, it could go in there. Reference can be a diagram, can be anything that you think the skill might be better using it. So now it's thinking, it's doing its thing. It went a little bit again outside our specified URLs, but it still went through the top 4. So it has a solid overview, and now it's fetching deeper details for top stories, which is really good, because if not, it can really hallucinate, and it can, put its own point of view and spin on it. And this is why I think it's important to be specific, factual, and avoid speculations, and always attribute the news to its original source. So, it's plain simple English, really, but you have to understand what to do and what not to do, or what to avoid. And now, it's gonna write the output, what we actually asked, the top 5 AI stories worth the attention this week. Well, did we say this week actually? We said from the last day. Oh, so see, this is where we have to be way more specific. Write a blog post with the top AI news from the last 24 hours. So we want to make sure that this skill is also engaged when we want to write the blog post. And if you want to go into a lot of details, what I would suggest is separate the skills. So have one skill for blog post, one skill for like maybe short form content, have a skill for your like daily, quick catch-ups of AI news, have smaller skills that are very specific instead of having like one large one for a catch-all, like for all purposes. So for example, this one is for my daily information, is for blog posts, is for X and LinkedIn, for general socials. Like, this is not the best breakdown, but it's more for you to see an overview of what it can be done. So now it loaded a couple of sources, did some additional high signal stories, which are worth mentioning. And now so as you can see, it's outputting the blog post with the strongest 5 stories from the last 24 hours. And we have a lineup. Okay, let's take a closer look at them. We have the blog. It says AI just had a very busy Wednesday. And it kind of breaks down what happened from the AI list. Now, because we added a limit here between 400 to 800 words, it clearly tried to compact as much as possible, be informative, readable, natural flow. Nah, that's a bit subjective. But it also included the suggested title. So as you can see here, what you could do is just have a full breakdown of how you'd like that blog post to look, and then separate the skill. And you can just have a full output if you want to. But this is pretty much it. If it worked, if so far everything worked for you as we set up this together, congratulations, you made it, you created your first skill. If it worked the way you wanted to from the first time, even better. If not, it's completely fine. Normally skills need a couple of iterations, as I'm sure you've seen. Look, we have 5-6 versions of it plus a blog post. So play around with it, refine it, tweak it, to make sure that it does whatever you need it to do. And I will leave everything in the description, linked in the description below. But please, please, please let us know if this worked for you, if it was interesting, if it helped you, or whatever you want to hear from us or see us building with Claude. I try to make an example that's easy, but in the same time that is a little bit more somewhat helpful, so you can understand how things work. Don't forget, the front matter is the one that matters the most. The name, the descriptions are the ones that Claude will be using. Everything else, you can tweak it as much as you want. But congratulations, you've just done your first skill. Let's talk about when things go a little bit wrong. How do we troubleshoot the skills? Well, most skills that a problem kind of fall into one of 6 categories. And the fixes are usually pretty quick and simple if you know where to look. The most common issue, by far, is that the skill does not activate when you expect it to. 9 times out of 10, this is a description or naming problem. So Claude actually matches your request to skills based on the name of the description of the field. And if the words do not overlap enough, it just doesn't match. The fix is quite simple. Add one more trigger phrase, one more word, something that's a little bit more descriptive and specific. Look at the exact way you phrase the request, and then check whether those words actually appear anywhere in the description. If they do not, add them. Anthropic's own documentation actually acknowledges that Claude tends to be a little bit more conservative about activating skills. So it's better to just make that description and naming slightly more specific or descriptive or aggressive to make sure that they trigger when they should. The second issue is that the skill does not show up at all when you actually check if it's available. This is almost always when the file structure has a problem. So the skill.md file needs to be inside a name directory, not sitting loose in the skill root. The file name needs to be exactly skill.md with capital letters. And the YAML front matter needs to be valid, meaning no missing dashes, no indentation errors, no stray characters, no random things added. If you are stuck, running Claude code with the -- debug flag will show you the loading errors, and it will point you directly to the problem. The third, Claude activates maybe the wrong skill. That can happen, especially if you have 2 or more skills that have a similar description or name, or they have quite a few common words. The fix is to make sure that each description is a little bit more specific. So instead of 2 skills that both mention reviewing or reviewing code, you should be a little bit more specific. So reviewing front-end accessibility, or reviewing front-end code, reviewing back-end code, make sure that you do that separation between them. Give Claude enough signal so it can actually tell it apart. The fourth one is a priority conflict. Skills actually have a hierarchy. You have first enterprise skills that override personal skills, which override project skills, which overrides plugin skills. So if you build a personal skill, but your organization maybe deployed an enterprise skill with more or less the same name, and yours gets ignored, then most likely that's the problem. The solution is very simple. Just rename yours to be a little bit more specific and distinctive. The fifth one, plugin skills not appearing after installation. Quite common. Clear the cache, restart Claude code, and reinstall the plugin. If they still do not appear, the plugin's internal structure might be wrong. Claude can be quite sensitive with that. The sixth one, the skill loads and triggers but fails during execution. Here you have 3 things to check. 1, dependencies. If the skill references a package or a tool, it needs to be installed in your environment. The second one, permission. If the skill runs a script, that skill needs execute permission. And the third one is the path. Use / everywhere, including on Windows. If you want a quick reference to add as a checklist to keep it around you, add this. Not triggering, fix the description. Not loading, fix the file structure. Wrong skill, make the description more distinctive. Being overwritten, rename it. Plugin missing, clear cache, reinstall, try again. Failing at runtime, check dependencies, permissions, and paths. This should cover about 95% of the problem that you most likely will run into. Okay, your challenge for this week. Build one skill, just one. Pick one task that you find yourself re-explaining and repeating to Claude the most. Your PR format, your email structure, your documentation, your weekly stand-up summary, whatever that might be that can help you and you find yourself asking Claude to do it again and again and again. Create a folder, ask Claude to help you create a skill, or, create it yourself. Write the description, put real effort into the description and the naming, because this is what makes or breaks it a lot of the time. Keep the instructions really clear, adjust and review where needed. Restart Claude Code, make sure you don't forget that. Test it with 1 or 2 different phrasing to make sure that it activates consistently. If it doesn't trigger the first try, you have the checklist. Fix the description, try again. The iteration is normal. It's actually part of the progress. All right, that's it for today. If this episode helped, send it to someone who uses Claude as well, but has never give custom skills a try before. It takes 10 to 15 minutes, and it can really change the way you work. If you love or hated this episode, as always, let us know in the comments below. We're here for both. Let's get the conversation started. And don't forget to like, subscribe, follow, and hit that notification bell so you never miss out of any of the upcoming episodes. We have tons of interesting topics. And don't forget to also join our community on thecasualleader.com. If you have in mind something specific that maybe you want us to cover, let us know in the comments as well, and we're going to give it a shot. We're actually trying to post polls a little bit more often to get your opinion as well and create things that actually help people and are useful to you too. Until next time, keep being you authentically, lead clearly, build smarter, and remember, everything starts with you. Start casual, keep going, keep growing. See you next week. Bye!